Hello, everyone. I'm Adelaide Reef, Manager of Leadership Development Programs here at Creative Australia. I use she, her pronouns. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that I'm joining this conversation today from the lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, where I live and work. I'm in the offices in Pyrmont today, and the Gadigal name for this place is Piriama. I pay my respect to First Nations elders past and present, and extend that respect to all First Nations folks that are joining us for today's conversation. I also want to acknowledge the many lands that you are joining us from today on this call. The Governance Conversation series is a collaborative project between Creative Australia and Diversity Arts, also known as DARTS. This series is designed to explore contemporary critical issues in arts governance, showcasing ideas, perspectives, and approaches that support artists and the communities that they work in and with. We are really grateful to DARTS for their insightful programming, bringing a really incredible array of guests from their extended networks into this series for what have been some really powerful and compelling conversations. Our thanks to Gurkum Agaralu and Lena Nalus and the team at DARTS, as well as our marketing and communications team here at Creative Australia for making this all possible. You can check out our other conversations from previous dates in the series. They are on the Creative Australia website. And you can also register for our final session, which will be on the 28th of March. You will also be able to find a range of resources available on our website from the 28th of March, so please keep an eye out for those. Today will be the first session for the series in 2024, and we're excited to delve into the topic of how boards can enable impact and support stakeholder engagement with our two excellent speakers, Mindy Liao and Elaine Chia. You can keep up to date with everything that's happening at Creative Australia by following us on social media. You can sign up to our newsletter. And now I will hand over to the wonderful Lena, who will host the conversation. Thanks, Lena.
Thanks so much, Adelaide, for that really warm introduction. I'm really looking forward to today's conversation. So before we'd like to start, I'd like to do a little bit of housekeeping too, and also acknowledge the First Peoples of the lands on which I'm on today, the Wangal people of the Eora Nation, and to pay my respects to their elders past and present, and acknowledge that it always was, always will be Aboriginal land. And I'd like to acknowledge the First Peoples of the many lands on which you're all joining us from today, from across the country, and feel free to share your acknowledgement of country in the chat. I'm a middle-aged Arab woman. I have light olive skin, dark wavy hair with some greys, and I'm currently wearing a brownish top and glasses. Thanks for attending today's governance conversation. A little bit about me. I'm the CEO of Diversity Arts Australia, and it's been a real pleasure to facilitate these conversations and partner with Creative Australia, who've really led this program. I'm excited about this conversation number 5 about impact and stakeholder governance. And if you need to catch up on the conversations, I'm sure someone will put a link in so that you can find the other 4 conversations. For those of you who aren't aware, Diversity Arts is Australia's national voice for racial and cultural equity in an ethno-cultural and migrant context. We work in partnership and in solidarity with many other communities and movements, and our work includes research, advocacy, training, producing events and resources, and supporting organisations and individuals via training. So some housekeeping. We really want today's session to be informative for all of you, and so you can ask questions using the Q&A function. We want it to be informative, but we also want it to be a respectful and productive session. Because of the format of this webinar, the main way you can participate is to use the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen to ask questions. If we have time at the end, we'll address some of the questions, and that always depends on the conversations and where they go. The session's being recorded and it will be shared to attendees via our event series page, as I mentioned, on the Creative Australia website from next week. We're also being Auslan interpreted today. So thank you to Rebecca Ladd and Jodie Rogers, who are providing Auslan support. And it's also being live captioned. So you can turn on live captions in the Zoom window by toggling the on-off down the bottom of the screen, the CC button at the bottom of your screen, and you can change the size of the text in the subtitle settings or pop out a window to view the full transcripts. And if you can't, if for some reason you fall off and can't get back in, the Zoom link is in the email you received when you registered. We also ask that if you agree to participate in this webinar, that you also agree to the following values that will guide the discussion. And these are to be respectful, professional, and to genuinely engage, to listen deeply, and to bring an openness, to be non-judgmental, and to behave in ways that, do the best to ensure that the safety of others. And while we acknowledge that a lot of these conversations can be quite uncomfortable, we do encourage you to lean into the discomfort. However, if at any time during the conversation you're finding the discussions difficult or stressful, then you're welcome to take a break and come back. Today, we're joined by two incredible leaders with an immense and diverse wealth of experience. So I'm so pleased to welcome Elaine Chia and Mindy Liao to this conversation. So they'll be diving into the art of engaging stakeholders and partners amidst much complexity. We'll explore the delicate balance between your organisation's or an organisation's objectives and those of stakeholders, especially in partnership and sponsorship negotiations. We'll talk about what role governance plays in promoting or supporting social and ethical impact. That's going to be a key question that we'll be unpacking. And over the next 90 minutes, we'll explore handling conflicts, maintaining integrity, reconciling different values while also meeting stakeholder needs. So let's dive in. Firstly, with Elaine Chia talking a little bit for about 10 minutes. Elaine will talk, and then Mindy will talk, and then and then I'll ask them some questions. So Elaine is an arts leader, advocate, and producer with over 20 years' experience in senior roles in performing and visual arts across venues, festivals, touring, and cultural infrastructure projects. She's currently CEO of the Naomi Milgram Foundation and chair of Contemporary Asian Australian Performance. Her previous roles include executive director at Adelaide Festival, CEO at Sydney's City Recital Hall, and director of international signature projects at Creative Australia, where she delivered public-private partnership projects and was the Australian representative at 3 Venice Biennales and worked on the redevelopment of the Australian Pavilion in Venice, Italy. So welcome, Elaine, and now over to you.
Thanks a lot, Lena. Hello, everybody. Thank you for that really warm introduction. I would like to start by acknowledging that I'm coming to you from Wurundjeri country in Naarm in Melbourne. I am a very proud Asian Australian. I have, I would say, sort of lighter hair. I just got it bleached because apparently a lighter colour helps cover the greys. And I'm wearing a black top and a black necklace. I would like to just start by, I think, acknowledging that, we work in a very dynamic and fast changing sector. I've had the enormous privilege of being supported to be an arts leader, and I really feel very passionate about my role to be able to give back to the sector across many dimensions. I have been an arts worker. I started by answering the phones and being an usher. I was given lots of opportunities to probably do work that I wasn't really qualified or ready for, but someone believed in me, and I was able to grow in that role. And in more recent years, I have taken leadership roles as CEO and arts leader and in the executive management, but also on boards. And I think the intersection for me of where executive leadership, artistic leadership, and board and governance come together is a very, very challenging, dynamic, but also empowering position. So I'd like to start by just posing a question which I ask myself and I ask a lot of others who may be on boards or in leadership roles. How do you balance creativity and also make sure that the organisation or your practice can live to fight another day? And that is a role that is increasingly challenging within an environment where there is static funding or decreasing funding, increasingly competitive funding, and a further lean into more increased private funding. And that comes with an agenda. All funding comes with an agenda, but I think that is where I'm particularly interested to see how we as a sector and individuals can also navigate through those challenges, because who is the master ultimately in this area? What is the impact that we're trying to make in the arts? What we do in the arts is inherently risky. We don't see failure in the same way as other businesses. So how do we manage and balance that and be open to the risks and to be open to what others may deem as failure, but also be sustainable? And for the last few years on various panels that I've sat on, I have talked a lot about the language of the arts. And the move that I believe we as a sector need to change our language in many ways. We talk traditionally about subsidy, and subsidy really doesn't get us very far, particularly in a very climate of economic challenges. So how do we talk about impact? How do we talk about investment? And how do we talk about investing in a product which is not selling widgets? It's not selling services. It's selling experiences. And these are not even ticket sales. I'm talking about how we sell experiences or commercialize in a way the art of improving our lives. Because I think we all agree and we all know that we're working in the arts, because what would life be like without the arts, without music, without film, without design, without everything that we touch is creative. So how do we value that and how do we bring that to the fore? But how does the arts also interrogate? How does the arts take us to another point of view that we would not necessarily find on our own? How do we expose ourselves to be a better society as a result of those conversations and perhaps that tension that can occur? So within that setting, I think about how arts boards are constituted. And as I said, I have the privilege of being a CEO. I also sit on arts boards, so I wear two hats and at various times. And boards, for me, are obviously responsible for governance. They have to ensure that governance is sound. But what does that mean? Governance for me means that the organisation is supported through a board to be able to fly. And the board should not, in my opinion, decide on artistic direction. It shouldn't decide on what projects are done or not done, other than whether it's viable or not. I really feel that the board's role is to assess the risk, but assess the risk in a way that enables the risk to take flight and not to shut things down because of risk. Now, that could be controversial, but from my experience, this is where the most dynamic and strongest arts boards come through. And that's where boards have a critical role to support the leadership to have conversations with major stakeholders. I've seen, you know, from when I started in very small to medium companies, there's a real concern that you have to grow. And we are now in a climate, and we can talk about post-COVID or other sort of situations, but we don't need to grow in terms of numbers. We don't need to grow in terms of the numbers of the amount of activity that we do. We have to revalue quality. And that's where I think governance, strong governance and strong boards come in to support the leadership to consider what that looks like, because it's about impact, much more about impact than about growth. Impact is demonstrable when you can feel the change. And I've been really fortunate to be part of a company that Lena mentioned as the chair of Contemporary Asian Australian Performance. When I joined the board in 2016, we were on project funding, one grant round from Extinction. I'm sure most of you can relate to that. And strategically, as a board, we thought about how do we actually, as I go back to saying, live to fight another day. And these are the conversations about how do we embed our conversations? How do we actually show our impact as a very, very small company with really one full-time person to demonstrate that what we do is important, what we do should be heard. And that is, I think, my proudest achievement amongst many other proud achievements, but to see an organisation have that sort of impact. And as a board member, to be able to say, we celebrate what we do, we celebrate our place in the sector because we celebrate every part of the sector, and we understand that those conversations can only happen because of others, and we can't do it alone. And the board's role and the governance role in that is to make sure that what the company does is able to be amplified in the right places. So I'm sure we're going to have lots of other points to discuss, but I'd like to sort of just, I think, close off with those points of thinking about what impact means and what is the role of governance in making sure that that impact has the deepest reach and the deepest result. Thank you, Lena.
Thanks, Elaine. Thanks for getting us to think about some very thorny, complex issues as well. Really important issues for people on boards and also people working in organisations in any management and CEO roles. And now I'd like to introduce Mindy, and all I need to do is find her bio. I'm so sorry, Mindy. It's because I was so deeply listening to you, Elaine. So it's totally your fault. So Mindy Liao is Director of Impact and Growth at B-Lab in Australia and Aotearoa at New Zealand. Mindy started her career in the media and advertising industry before moving from the USA to Australia, where she's been working at the intersections of purpose and profit for more than a decade. Prior to joining B-Lab in 2016, Mindy was involved in growing the social enterprise sector in Australia through her roles at Social Traders and Start Some Good. Mindy is a passionate advocate for business as a force for good and has been instrumental in growing the B Corp movement in this region, working with hundreds of businesses to measure and improve their impact. She holds qualifications in business, journalism, and an MBA in sustainability and social entrepreneurship. Mindy serves as an ambassador for Better Futures Australia, promoting ambitious climate action. So welcome, Mindy, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Lena. Hello, everyone. I am Mindy. I use she, her pronouns. I am a middle-aged woman of Southeast Asian descent. I was born and grew up in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, in a Chinese-Malaysian family. And today I'm wearing an emerald green shirt with matching earrings, and I'm dialing in from Nam, Melbourne. And I also want to acknowledge and pay respects to the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nation as the custodians and first people of this land. I feel incredibly humbled to be speaking to you all today, as I don't normally work in the arts and creative sector, but I do hope to bring some of my past and current experience to this conversation about governance. So a bit about my background, which I will be drawing from. I arrived in Australia about 15 years ago, and I identify as a corporate refugee. And since then, I have been changed careers and have been working in the not-for-profit and social enterprise sector. I have worked directly with community organizations, social entrepreneurs, and most recently, purpose-led businesses and organizations. Currently, I have a role at B-Lab Australia and Aotearoa New Zealand. And in fact, today is exactly my 8th year anniversary at B-Lab. And B-Lab is the nonprofit behind B Corp certification for businesses. For those of you who may not be aware of B Corp, it is a certification for for-profit companies who want to be a force for positive impact in the world. And our vision as a movement is to see an economic system that is inclusive, equitable, and regenerative, and that businesses benefit all people and the planet, and not just shareholders. To achieve this ambitious vision, our work to date has been directly with the business community. We develop tools, build standards, and to encourage behavior and cultural change within business. B-Lab has been around for 18 years globally and 10 here in Australia. And we are really encouraged to see that there's actually been an acceleration in the shift in business from a shareholder primacy model to one of stakeholder primacy, where more and more businesses are embracing purpose, they're managing their impacts and improving those impacts, and wanting to be a force for positive change in the world. We are really encouraged that here in Australia and New Zealand, there are almost 700 businesses that have certified, and more than 8,000 globally. For those companies certified in this region, it also means that they have legally adopted stakeholder governance to consider stakeholders, be that workers, community, customers, and the environment, in their decision-making in order to deliver more positive impact. So this shift in business is incredibly encouraging and what we really need more in the world. And the shift to embrace purpose and profit is one that is happening around the world. So the provocation posed for this session that I'm slightly reframing is, if for-profit companies are becoming for purpose, what is the arts sector's role in promoting social and ethical impact? And maybe the better question to ask is, how far do you and can you go to promote social and ethical impact? Unfortunately, I'm not giving you the answer today, but I will share a couple of practical ways that you can do so. So drawing from my experience currently working with businesses, we offer a free holistic assessment tool called the B Impact Assessment that enables any organization to measure and manage their impact. The BIA, or the B Impact Assessment, has 250 questions. It is comprehensive and it covers 5 sections to understand the impact of an organization on its workers, the community, its customers, the environment, as well as governance. So one of the ways to think about impact is to really consider the impact it is having to its stakeholders, both positive as well as negative. And impact measurement is definitely the first step we encourage organizations to undertake, because you can't manage what you don't measure. So we offer up this tool to larger organizations, which I know are amongst you in the audience today, it would be a really informative tool to undertake for larger organizations and projects to really understand the potential impact that you could be having on your stakeholders. But what about for smaller organizations? How else can you meaningfully practice stakeholder governance? As many of you would have already experienced, balancing stakeholder needs is complex. So what I would like to offer today from our experience of working with businesses to help them embrace stakeholder governance is a practical, but it may not be easy way. It's a really practical way for boards to consider stakeholder needs. And this can be an exercise that is done by the boards of large and small organizations. So I'll just run through this exercise really quickly, and you may need to dedicate a board meeting specifically to this topic or to this exercise. And you want to start by making a list of stakeholders of your organization. Then the first exercise is to rank your stakeholders according to their importance from a financial perspective. So obviously, funders and donors will probably rise to the top. And it's really important that everyone attending shares their view as to why that is, why they've ranked the way that they have, and understand those different perspectives. Now, the second exercise is to then look at the same set of stakeholders, but really rank them again, but from a moral and ethical lens. Consider to whom you might owe some social responsibility. And from this conversation, you might discover some new stakeholders that previously did not show up from that first exercise. Naturally, from the second exercise, artists or employees or the community, and maybe even nature might show up as stakeholders that are important to your organization. And again, why? Why is that? And how do you, and why the ranking is such? And so, as I said before, this is not an easy conversation, and it is not aimed at achieving consensus, and you're probably unlikely to get to a full agreement around the rankings. But the point is having the robust conversation and understanding the diverse views as well as the tensions between these stakeholder needs. After this meeting and the exercise, you may need to further engage the management team to gather more information or further engage a particular stakeholder group. But ultimately, this enables the board to guide and to steer the organization towards better strategic decisions. Last but not least, I will introduce the image of a seesaw for balancing the organizational financial needs, the very provocative question that Elaine posed around, how do you live another day, to the needs of all these other non-financial stakeholders. And at the same time, using the seesaw analogy, it is about prioritizing what is most important to the organization at a particular time. And drawing from my experience working in social enterprises, it is a delicate balance that you may decide to make different decisions at different times, sometimes prioritizing your financial needs, but sometimes prioritizing your mission, your purpose, your stakeholders. If an organization's only prioritizing financial needs, there might be mission drift, which can happen in community organizations and social enterprises. And so this image, this analogy of a seesaw is a really good one to constantly remind yourself of. So to summarize my introduction, hopefully I'm leaving you with the message that stakeholder governance is important, but it's also achievable. It is easy to start by having those robust conversations and building your muscle over time. I've also hopefully left you with some practical examples of how you can do that. Larger organizations might benefit from undertaking the free B impact assessment, but all organizations, large and small, can begin to consider your stakeholder needs and better engage your stakeholders and allow their voices to be heard. With that, I will pass it back to you, Lena.
Thanks so much, Mindy, for giving us some food for thought about the importance of governance in terms of social and ethical concerns, and bringing your impact and entrepreneurial lens to the conversation. I'm wondering if there's a way that we can get the link to the B impact assessment for larger organisations, so that the tool, so that if anyone's interested and large enough, they might be able to do it. Also, thank you so much for those 2 exercises that I know I'm definitely going to do with my board as well, about how to think about stakeholders in at the governance level. So I'm going to ask you some questions now, following on from those. I don't know, with the link, is that something, the link to the B Corps, is it easy to find on your website? Can we pop it in somehow? Yeah.
Lena,
Oh, look, you've popped it in. Great. Okay. So fantastic.
Assessment. And look, it's not just for large organizations. Any organization would benefit from taking the tool. But large organizations might have the data more easily available to answer the questions, because we really do get into, quite a lot of reporting. But just going through the tool itself will really uncover some interesting questions and tensions and food for thought.
Yeah, and I liked what you said about when we do the exercises to also know that we're not going to agree with each other necessarily, but to really try and deeply listen and understand each other's positions. So you've both mentioned, I guess, balancing, sponsors, donors. So to both of you, maybe starting with Elaine, how do you, or how should you as an organisation, find and work with philanthropic and sponsorship partners or sponsors, philanthropies and sponsors? Elaine, can I pass that to you?
Sure. I'll go first. Yeah, it's the multi-million-dollar question, isn't it? As a fundraiser, having raised significant funds for major projects, I think that it's, let's be completely honest, it's very challenging. It's a challenging environment out there, but I'm extremely, and have always been extremely optimistic. The reason I feel that way is because I think that I have a real belief that everyone wants to make a difference. We want to give. I think charity in Australia is obviously not the same level as in the States and other places, but there is a very strong willingness for people to give back. So I would say for organisations, my starting point is always look at the values, look at your values, make sure that they're public, make sure that the people that you want to speak to understand and share and have that alignment with your values, because the artistic output, the projects, whatever you're trying to or looking to find support for is really based around an expression of those values. And they're out there. I say to a lot of organisations, don't forget your ticket buyers. Your ticket buyers are the stickiest philanthropists there. Yes, it's transactional, but the fact that they keep buying tickets means that they like what you do. So look at that and enter into a conversation with them about why they keep coming back. What is it that they can do? And think about the additional deepened engagement that you can have with those philanthropic and other partners. The alignment is incredibly important. And following from that, it is about building and talking about the story of, the sustainability aspect of it. I believe that, the best partners that we have are there for the long term, or there for a fixed term. And that is defined up front. It is, of course, very challenging to get year on year or project by project funding, or to, and I've seen it too, where you will find someone who will support a creative development. And once it's presented, they feel like others can join on and that's their job is done. And, I can totally understand that. But I think how do you find those philanthropic partners is about looking firstly at your values, firstly, then looking at the alignment, and then having the conversation. It's a long journey. It doesn't happen quickly, but in my experience, once you actually have those conversations, it becomes actually very easy. And a lot of really generous people out there will actually say, we love what you do. How can we help?
I definitely support what Elaine has said around alignment of mission, purpose, and objectives and values. And I would add to that, my observation of the philanthropic sector is that, yes, there's arts funders, there's also a lot of, there's impact funding as well. And so bringing my impact lens here that from a business perspective, well, if that is added to a project, if that is added to an arts organization, that increases the value proposition, sorry to use business words here, but the value proposition of the project, of the organization. And I think that may open up additional funding opportunities, you know, with more partners, additional funders as well. And the other thing I would say too is when we talk about partners, I wonder if there is, you know, the opportunity here to really consider partnering with other organizations as well to deliver, whether they're arts organizations or impact organizations, so that it really kind of, you know, expands on that value proposition of the project. Lena, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I think you've already touched on, I was going to also kind of ask you about how you, I guess, find those organisations who are supporting social impact and social benefit, and the board's role. But I feel that, Elaine, you have touched on that. I mean, you've spoken about your ticket buyers and about starting conversations and you know, being transparent about your mission as an organisation and having that, you know, well known to whoever you might be approaching. But are there specific strategies or ways in which you actually are able to identify and as you know, from a governance perspective, those organisations that boards should play a role in that are supporting social impact or social benefit that you haven't already discussed?
Yeah, I'll add a point there. Sorry if that question was for Elaine, but if an organization is expanding into impact, I think it's really important to spend some time understanding the issue at hand, the topic at hand. If an organization is partnering with a new organization, may not be an arts organization, I think it's important to explore the different types of organizations working in that space and really understanding sort of why they have different approaches to solving that problem, that social problem or social issue, before jumping into a solution or a partnership. So funders, at least impact funders or impact investors, want to see outcomes and they want to see impact being delivered. Often the impact is harder to measure and quantify, but it's really, really important to have, you know, the theory of change for creating change established, so that, you know, for that partnership, hopefully it's long term. As Elaine said, it is a really sound logic of, you know, investing in this project that will deliver these outcomes that eventually able to deliver particular impacts.
Thanks so much, Mindy. Unless you want to add anything, Elaine, I can move to the next question, which is for you.
I might just sort of quickly add that I think that, you know, that there is, we talk about language, and I love Mindy's language around all of this, because I think it is relatively new for us in the arts sector, but so important. But me as in joining, you know, as CEO of the Naomi Milgram Foundation, a lot of the questions that we ask of ourselves as a philanthropic foundation is, what difference will we make? And that is increasingly more, I think, moving into the social enterprise, social sort of impact space, and really exciting because it's a little shift. It's of course very aligned, but it is a very different shift in the thinking and our approach, because it is outcomes based, and defining the outcome is sometimes, I think, not so easy, but it forces us to think about why we do what we do and to be able to communicate that to potential philanthropists or sponsors. And a great exercise. If you can't believe in what you do and if you can't express it, then no one else is really going to be able to understand it either.
It's a very good point. Elaine, you've worked in very large organisations, but you've also worked in small organisations that may not have a big development team or even a development team. How much is a board expected to give of their time and money? And what are the traditional expectations of boards?
I don't know who's in this seminar, so apologies in advance if I'm being provocative, but I have a very strong belief that being on a board is not about giving just your time and your expertise. You have to give money. Doesn't matter what the quantum is. It's an expression of support. I believe that every board member should contribute financially, and every board member should be talking about the organisation with great pride in every appropriate setting that they can. So there is, as you say, Lena, I've worked in small organisations. I'm the chair of an organisation that currently has 2 not quite full-time staff, certainly no development team. And of course, the board has to do the heavy lifting in that aspect. And proudly so. I've worked in larger organisations, for example, like the Adelaide Festival, where there was a foundation and a separate board with a separate entity whose sole role was to support fundraising for the festival. In many ways, the board members that joined and the directors that join that board understand their role very clearly. But I don't think that it changes in terms of what the quantum is. We have to give. We have to encourage people to give. We come in with an act of generosity of our time, our expertise, and our money. And so the board should be able to, with management, approve a budget with a line for philanthropy or for partnership, understanding that they have a role to actually support the management to meet that line, that budget line. Otherwise, you're just setting, your management up to fail. I really truly believe that, if every board member could do that, then we would be a much more sustainable sector.
Mindy, you have a slightly different take on this, don't you? So with your social enterprise hat on, how do we challenge the role of the board, and how does a board play a different role in governance rather than just the fix the business model kind of role? So really interested to hear your perspective on this as well.
Yeah, for me, it's actually really fascinating to hear Elaine's response around the expectations of an arts board to really come in with, their wallets and their networks to help the organization survive. It almost is a strategy, it seems. This is very different from my experience coming from the social enterprise sector, as well as more recently for-profit organizations and for-purpose as well, where I often see the role of the board is really around strategy and governance. And when we think about fixing the business model, it's actually finding income streams, diversifying the income streams so that it's not reliant on a particular donor or a particular funder, which is unsustainable if something happens, with funding cuts and whatnot. So for me, fixing the business model is really not about plugging the gap, but rather having a business model that is market-oriented, market-based. And I love what Elaine was talking about, looking at current at customers, ticket buyers, if there can be ways to not rely, to have the risks reduced, financial risk reduced. And I think that's how I see boards can play a strategic role. And I think that actually requires a mindset shift in the organization. This requires thinking about funding, thinking about income in more enterprising ways. And, and you might have to look into maybe the startup world, in the social enterprise world, to see how organizations are diversifying their incomes, whether it's from like crowdfunding or cross-sector partnerships. And I've come across, in my world, I've come across certified B Corps who use a private business model to work in the arts. Art Pharmacy is one, the first arts-based B Corp in Australia. They call themselves art curators, placemakers, and art consultants. They have locked in their purpose. But also they use a business model for their long-term viability. And another one that I have come across is Color Space. They are a certified social traders enterprise. They use an art subscription model. Hopefully I'm describing this correctly, to put art in corporate and public spaces, and this generates income and makes art accessible to more people and generates income for artists. And I encourage really looking at these innovative ideas, going to the Social Traders Directory, the Social Enterprise Finder, and looking at the arts social enterprises there to see how are they positioning their businesses and coming up with new innovative business models that will balance both their, achieving their mission, but also their own long-term viability.
Thank you. So, really good tips there. So everyone go to the Social Traders Directory for some inspiration and to learn a little bit more. I think for me, coming from a social and community services background and then working for a long time in the community and cultural development space, I also always have to, Elaine, also challenge a little bit that everyone needs to give financially, because I know that I've been the CEO of organizations where we have on our boards people from one of the public housing estates that we were working in at the time, or people who are more recently arrived as migrants, or who may come from refugee backgrounds and may not always be able to give financially, but will always give all these other amazing resources and support and connections. So I always need to kind of push back a little bit with that as well. So although I do take your points, and both of you had such great complementary positions, I think, to talk about the role of the board. In terms of the long-term sustainability of the organisation, what's the role of the board, and what's needed for an organisation to build sustainable capabilities in an environment where where Elaine has said funding's really, really tough. We all know that it's very tough, that we're often funded project to project. And I think, Elaine, you said something very funny about, contemporary Asian Australian performance of being one grant away from pretty much going out of business. So what is the role of the board in terms of sustainability of the organisation? How can they support that? Oh, who would like to go next?
I can jump in and really build on what I was saying in the last question. That my view is that instead of plugging the gaps and funding, the role and maybe that is the need now, and that needs to be filled, and also building the capability of the organization to diversify their income streams, to develop different partnerships and funding models, income models, and this requires time. I think it's important to be patient. Just using B-Lab as an example, I have been here exactly 8 years, as I shared before, and only in the last few years we have our business model, which has not really changed for many years. We have a certification membership-like model that only really started to take off in the last few years, and it was many years of sticking with it, believing that it will happen, and building the team, grow slowly, growing the organization. So yes, you got to do the research, and you got to really back the team, support the CEO and the whole team to really take a different approach to the organization, and embedding this enterprise thinking. And I think when you're experimenting with these different partnerships or funding models, you are embracing innovation, and that means there will be failure. And I was very encouraged to hear from Elaine that, maybe the arts sector is used to that, and that's really good, because it's about failing forward. It's about how quickly can you learn from those failures and pivot from there. And I'm using language from the startup world, constantly pivoting to grow and to further tinker at the business model. So one of the things that we often, as a test for us, is it safe enough to try? So sometimes there can be a conundrum around needing to have the perfect solution, needing to do all the business planning. And yes, there's value in doing that, but also it's important to give it a try, prepare people to fail if it doesn't, and to learn from it, developing that learning mindset.
Thanks so much, Mindy. Yes, I think in the arts, taking risks is something that a lot of organisations are very comfortable doing in terms of the actual artists and the practice. Elaine, did you have anything to add to that? Oh, you're on mute. You're on mute.
Sorry, Alina. Yeah, stop doing that. I think we'd have learned after how many years anyway. I just want to firstly just quickly respond to your comment, and I totally agree with we are talking about sort of really sort of like different sort of, I guess, contrasting worlds. When I sort of qualify the fact that the board should give, I did mention it's about quantum. It doesn't actually matter if it's just $1. I think it's the gesture. For me, that is the important thing. It's not about the quantum at all. It's so let me just clarify that it's never about a certain value. It's about something that just is the gift, But anyway, in terms of sustainability, I totally agree with Mindy. The role of the board is about looking at what the business model is. Is the business model, the current business model, sustainable? Is it innovative? Can it withstand shocks, external shocks, unexpected shocks? That's the role for me, of a board, to be able to interrogate that without sounding alarm bells way ahead of time, but in a very positive, proactive way, to say, maybe we need to think about how do we shift or adjust or just reset in a way that enables us to then grow is probably the wrong word, move forward for sustainability. And I think that we see that all the time, that it's, we in the arts, write 3 to 5 year strat plans, and it happens far less now. But when I started, 10, 15 years ago, you'd write it, you'd give it to your funding bodies, everyone would tick off, and then it'd just go in the drawer. And you'd only review it when something went wrong. The model for boards now is to really interrogate, as I said, that, and to always think about, is it going to actually be able to recover? Can we recover from unexpected shocks? And stay true to our values, stay true to our vision, and be opportunistic to take those new directions and the risks of that, maybe even before others are ready to. And that is the dynamic role I feel that a board can encourage leadership to do, within a boundary of saying, well, there is a governance framework, but the governance framework actually is about making sure that we are always open to innovation.
Nice. Thank you so much. So what about personal ethics and the needs of the company or the organization. How do we navigate that? And that's obviously a big question at the moment, here and in the world more broadly. Is there, there's always the question of whether an organization, for example, takes responsibilities from certain companies or bodies that may not align with the ethics of the artists or the staff. And it's a complex issue. So I wanted to speak to you both about some of that and the complexity of that. So I've kind of thrown two questions into one a little bit, navigating personal ethics with the need of a company, and also, whether an organization, how an organization approaches sponsorship from certain companies and bodies, where sometimes there will be a real pushback and serious consequences from if artists and staff are not in alignment, if your communities aren't in alignment with that. Who should I throw this lovely thesis to? It's definitely a PhD. With Elaine or Mindy?
I'm going to respond first. It's challenging. It's an extremely, we're as individuals, as organisations, we're very complex. The reason that I think, the arts is so dynamic, or any organisation thrives, is because of our differences. They could be very minor, but they could be, a chasm, as we know. But it's the commonality that I find is so important. And we have to, I think we all need to give ourselves the opportunity to feel, we talk about cultural safety, but to feel safe in a workplace, that we can have our own belief, our own lived experience. That is what contributes to the success of, and to our own personal reward of why we do what we do every day, and why we give of ourselves every day, because we believe that ultimately it's aligned with what we do and what the others that we work with in our team, whether it's artists, creators, funders, partners, sponsors. We believe in that commonality, and that shared value overrides our differences. I'll give you just one very quick example. When I was at the recital hall, I started this crazy idea called Flash Mob Choir, where we called a spontaneous choir via SMS. And within 3 years, we had 10,000 subscribers. And I used to stand on stage once a month and say, I don't know how you've all turned up. It was, somewhere between 300 and 1,000 people would turn up to sing together. But for these 45 minutes, it doesn't matter where you've come from. It doesn't matter where what you do when you leave. For these 45 minutes, you've decided to come together and share something together. And I think that's what I hold very dear to in these very troubling times, that we will keep that shared value, that commonality, and that's how our personal ethics feeds into that to move forward together.
Thanks.
It's such a good question, Lena. And, how do we navigate personal ethics with the needs of the company? And I might reframe that question to say, how might we navigate personal ethics with the needs of the stakeholders of the organization, and taking that stakeholder view again. And again, it's about, I think, understanding the needs and the views and the tensions that are involved, and being able to hold those tensions. I think that's really, really important. And to what Elaine said, then find the commonality, like being the bridge, building the bridge to find that commonality. And sometimes that doesn't exist. Sometimes the views are just different, and we can agree to embrace the diversity. But I think as much as we can bring conversation to it and promote understanding, that is really, like this is the times that we live in.
So how transparent should you be, and how would you communicate to your stakeholders and your communities more broadly about who your sponsors and funders are? Does it need to be disclosed? Maybe either of you. Elaine, I'll throw to you first. And
I think if you're going to be authentic, yes. we have to stand up and understand what we do in every decision that we make. I mean, that's a huge responsibility of arts leaders. So yes, I the simple answer is yes. We have to make very considered decisions. We have to personally, but as an organisation, as a board, understand, as Mindy said, our stakeholder relationships, value them. And once we have gone through that journey, then I think that we should be able to be transparent about that.
Do you agree, Mindy, or what's your position on?
Yep, I agree with that. And in the work that we do, promoting transparency is actually one of the requirements of certification, and because that leads to authenticity, as Elaine said, but ultimately trust. And to build long-term partnership, even with diverse views, I think that is possible if there is trust. So it is about building that relationship with your stakeholders, and it takes time. And I think, coming back to that question before, like when you are faced with risks, decisions that, can take an organization either way, it's important to understand those risks and also take care to protect those relationships. And if you decide to do something maybe slightly controversial that might not sit well with a particular stakeholder, take care to explain why you're doing that, and take care to be, I think communication is really key.
Thank you so much. So I want to kind of shift a little bit to talk, although I feel like we have definitely talked about this a little bit, about balancing competing interests and needs and what to do when it all goes wrong. And I believe, Elaine, you have a bit of an example, and so does Mindy, to kind of share with us. So happy to start with either of you, but I know, Mindy, you actually had said in pre-conversation that you deal with controversies all the time, and that you actually had mentioned I believe the London Science Museum example, and I wondered if you'd like to kind of share that.
Yeah, I'll start with that, because this is an example from a number of years ago, and this kind of draws from my experience of working in kind of climate activism and advocacy, and there are many other similar examples like this, and the example is that the Science Museum in London a number of years ago took a sponsorship from Shell for a climate change exhibition, which really attracted lots of attention about greenwashing. And unfortunately, I think there's been a further example of another sponsorship at the Science Museum with a Norwegian fossil fuel company. So as many organizations have, started to kind of realize our role in shifting to a renewable world and severing sort of relationships or working with fossil fuel, with polluting companies, that has really been a shift. And this is a controversy, obviously, that took a lot of attention. Our view at B Lab is actually kind of twofold. Like because we are a behavior change and cultural change organizations, we actually believe in also working with organizations. If not, they won't change. And so we actually try to embrace that tension and bring people along the journey as well. But it is in this example for the Science Museum, it's really interesting where, I wonder what was the impetus for doing that, and had they realized the potential reputational damage that would have come to them by taking on that sponsorship. So it is something to be aware of, and so hopefully that is one that we can apply to our organizations.
It's a really good example. Elaine, what do we do when it all goes wrong? Would you also like to share your example? I feel like I did forget to ask you this before we started.
No, it's fine. I mean, I think I've been in the, I would say, the fortunate position in hindsight, but right at the time it felt very unfortunate position of being in a couple of instances where it did go all terribly wrong. And it's devastating, and it's sometimes you just can't work your way through because it's at most times unexpected. I'll give you one very light example. First of all, is when I was at the recital hall, you know, we quite often would be approached by certain companies to hold their annual general meetings. Corporate hire, venue hire was and is for every, I think, venue, you know, what supports the cultural program. So we would all prefer probably not to have to sort of, you know, move too far down the corporate venue hire route, but it pays very well. And we did get approached by an organisation to do an annual general meeting, and my team actually, a lot of them refused to work on that because they felt that this company was working in an area that was not something that they wanted to support. We had a very deep, robust discussion around that. And in the end, we agreed that those who didn't feel comfortable working for that particular event should not work. Some of them actually went out with the protesters and protested at the front of our venue on the day. But we all agreed that we needed to go ahead and actually accept that because it was a place for us to voice our differences, but also allow that conversation to be had. So that's one example. The other example, which is the one that Lena had, you know, we had touched on, you know, in a pre-conversation, and many of you who would be working in visual arts would remember that there was a big sort of blow up around Transfield and the Biennale of Sydney some years ago, around the fact that Transfield was awarded the contract to run the offshore detention centres, and the Biennale was boycotted. I mean, I think that is an example very close to home where it did go terribly, terribly wrong. I say that it went terribly wrong because not because, you know, of the boycott, because I think that artists have every right to use, and that's what we expect artists to provide commentary to really, you know, big events to activate the community to think about these really, really difficult issues. Where I believe it went wrong is because Transfield, the organisation, the company that was awarded the contract to run the detention centres, was a different company to Transfield Holdings, who actually supported the Biennale of Sydney. And I think it went wrong personally because I think that nuance was lost in that conversation. And as a result of that, a family that actually founded the Biennale and had philanthropically given so much to so many of those artists and others for many years, was damaged for, I think, I'm not sure whether they'll ever really recover from that. And if there had been an opportunity just to be able to have the separation to say, it is a complex issue, we do think that this is wrong, but this is actually what the real sort of full comprehensive story is, then that for me was very disappointing to see that that didn't happen.
Thank you so much, Elaine. And two really good, I think, really good and kind of concrete examples. Now, before I move to the other examples, we do actually have a very good, I think, a very good question in the chat. A great provocation from Don, asking, if the board is expected to be unpaid, does management donate their time and money as well? I think this is a really great question in the arts at the moment, in particular, because we've been also asking questions about when we have, for example, always requiring using a lot of labour for First Nations people's labour and expecting it to be constantly given for free, or other other groups. So I know I'm kind of shaking up the convo a bit here, but I thought it was a question that I'd really like to hear your perspectives on. If that's okay, did I just totally throw you a curveball? Am I going to get in trouble off Gherkin?
I'll have it have a go. I think that, well, I think the rules of engagement are slightly different. A board, an arts board, certainly. I mean, there's lots of boards that are not unpaid. I don't know what in your world, Mindy, whether the boards are unpaid, but certainly in the arts, the expectation that if you join a board, you are unpaid. We understand that when we join. Management are appointed to do a job, and they're paid for their job. I think that, managers, all arts workers already donate a significant amount of their time and money because no one works a 38-hour week in the arts, as we know. I don't think that for me, yes, a board, if you don't feel that a board should be unpaid, then you shouldn't join that board.
My experience with the community sector and not-for-profits in general is that, vast majority of not-for-profit boards are volunteer boards and give their time. It's kind of like they give back to community. I hope, like, this is just a reality, I think, of what we are facing in the sector because of the resource constraints. However, I don't necessarily think that we should change that if we can. And, even if nominal amounts to pay boards for their contributions. And I think that also speaks to a bit of maybe potentially an issue. I'm being a bit provocative here and sharing my personal views, that I think boards being unpaid in the charitable sector, is a sign of can bring its own bias to the board due to sort of only being in a privileged position enables you to take on a volunteer board role. So, and if we are truly going to have robust governance, how do we bring the voices of the underrepresented, diverse views to the boardroom table, to the boardroom conversations? So yes, I think that I'm slightly taking this question to a different direction here, but yeah, there is something to be said here about boards expected to be unpaid.
Yeah, thank you so much for those perspectives. And just in terms of what we were talking about, at moments where there are big crises, our values often become even more important. So how do we find and come back to, how do we centre ourselves so that, and I think Elaine kind of talked about this a little bit, where we can each feel safe in ourselves and in the environment in which we work, but where we can also agree to not have the same opinions. So how do we do that in the work that we do, and what role does the board have in helping to facilitate facilitate an environment where people can have different views, different opinions, different positions, but also feel safe at work, feel they're aligned with the work, with the organisations, their values and ethics, values. Yep. Who would like? Yes.
I'll jump in. I mean, I think that putting on my my hat as the chair of a board, as when situations get tricky, I think overridingly dialogue is so important. The conversation is so important that there is not the mismatch of the fact that there's management speaking, then there's someone who's reporting to the board. The board are having conversations that the management don't understand necessarily because it's in camera. And then does that actually then filter down to the staff as a direction or a decision where there's not their input? that is where I think that we have the real risk that things can break down. There is now, I think more than ever, I've had so many conversations around how do we navigate that together, and how do we bring a forum where we can actually just talk. How do we express our view and not necessarily come to a decision? Because maybe there isn't a decision right away. Maybe there isn't an outcome right away, but having that space and prioritizing that space for people to express how they feel, that is about, I think, just core to, being good citizens and being good organisations and good boards.
Thanks, Elaine.
Yeah, and I would really agree with that. That I think first and foremost, it is about creating a safe space where people can express their different opinions. And they're actually very different ways of doing that. Affinity groups, potentially one being one, but also just anonymous ways that, and I know it's tricky to do when you have a very small organization to do that. And maybe, if that is the case, anonymity is difficult, then it is having a facilitator create a very safe space for people to express their views and to have those views be heard and acknowledged. And so agree with Elaine that sometimes it's not having to arrive anywhere, but just really to have them heard, just to put it out there and to acknowledge that. I think creating that shared understanding through dialogue is, again, adding to Elaine's point.
And sometimes when there are crises, people shut down and they're not open to different views and different perspectives, and so it's it can be quite tricky. And quite often in the arts and creative sectors, it's seen that the role of the arts and creative sector is often the work that's produced. A lot of the work, the creative work, is about shifting things. It's about challenging. It's about intervening into existing systems. Kind of connected to this, do you think that the role of the arts is to kind of provoke, and that there should be, that people within organisations should be given a big voice to be able to provoke? So, artists, creatives who you're working with, and to do that work, or is it the role to kind of build bridges and bring people on the journey? So, Elaine.
I think it's both, Lena. I don't see them as being independently, I think that this is the beauty of the and the multiplicity of the industry that we, in the sector that we work in, that there are lots of different voices, and and putting those two together is where we can find the positive tension to get a better outcome for our society. Some are better being activists, and there's a lot more articulate, many more articulate people out there than me who know how to say things and cut through the red tape and really, have a voice that I really, really admire, even if I might not agree with. And there's others that perhaps a little bit more like me, who are maybe, would like to think that we have an ability to build bridges and find a way to be inclusive to all of those conversations. So I think both.
Okay, thanks, Elaine. Mindy, do you have anything to add?
Definitely both, but I think that I would lead with, there is this unique opportunity as creatives, as creators, to transcend that, like to work on this challenge. How can we be both provocative, bring your unique perspective, and build a bridge. So that would be my challenge to artists.
I like that. A new provocation for a new work series. We also have another question in the chat, which is that leaders in the art or not-for-profit sector have a responsibility to change the circumstances and systems we're in, not strengthening them. And the reality of arts industry has forced so many of us to leave the industry.
Totally agree. Tricky, very, very tricky. And it's especially post, during the COVID, just the number of really, really talented people who left our sector to go because they just had enough and it was just all too hard. We need to change what we do. This is the role that I think that private sector has with government, and I hope, and I know from my speaking to those leaders at the Australia Council, there's a real interest to do it, but we absolutely we can only strengthen it by changing it. And maybe the models, as Mindy sort of alluded to, is that we need to take that inspiration from the area that Mindy's worked in, around social impact and others, because there are very, very successful models out there, and the arts could really learn from that.
Yep, I'm really interested in exploring Mindy's models more as well for our sector. I think they will really be relevant.
Can I jump in there with just some, I really feel, the sadness here around like people leaving something that they're so passionate because of just the reality of it. And I, working in change that I do is all about challenging the systems. And I think that is worth working on. It is not to kind of perpetuate the system and not just to keep, seeing another day, but really how can we be part of changing that system? And the system is actually made out of people. So, and it's really, starts with like how holding the people that we have in this system, and we have to be innovative. I think we can be innovative to support our people, whether it is to kind of, within the organization, raise their emotional health, to deal with the complexity, to hold people through times of crisis, but also to work collaboratively, maybe with the corporate sector, not just from a sponsorship perspective. Maybe it is from internships, maybe it is from secondments and leadership and training and developing, so that our people in the arts have the different types of training and mindsets and skills that they can develop to bring back to the sector to help change the system that we're currently in.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that, both of you. We only have a few minutes left. We have about 7 minutes left, and we're going to be popping in a little survey at the end so that you can tell us, give us some feedback on the session, which we really value. I hope we can do these very succinctly, which you've managed to do very well, both of you. So thank you. Elaine, previously we were talking about kind of cultural safety and the intersections of conflict and tension. We often talk about those things, but we don't always talk about kind of cultural safety. So what is the role of cultural safety in these conversations?
Oh, it's up there at the top. I mean, what does it mean for cultural safety in today's world? It transcends. I think we have to navigate that through, lived experience, cultural heritage, where we are now, what our current identity is, what our religion is. I mean, there's so many components of it, and the acceptance of someone being different and having a different opinion is, for me, the first point. We have to come into a room, and I think even Lena, when you sort of set, the scene today about how we might have this conversation, is, Mindy and I, and even you and I, don't necessarily have to agree, and we shouldn't agree, but we're all wanting the same thing. And so to create that place is to say, we accept and celebrate your difference. We celebrate, as uncomfortable as it is for me, at times, I want to embrace that, because I will not grow as a person if I only see more of what I agree with. So that for me is where cultural safety is really, really important. And we have to live and breathe it as leaders, as boards, with our stakeholders every minute of every conversation.
Thanks so much, Elaine. Unless you want to add to that, Mindy, I have a different question to throw to you. Or unless you wanted to add.
I'll just add that it's along the same lines, but it's really, it can be uncomfortable, and it's about not denying the lived experience of the different view, even though it's maybe in total opposition to your position. So I think that it is about that shared respect, shared meaning, shared knowledge. Yeah.
And my question, maybe we won't be able to answer now, but it's about how you actually do that. Like what strategies you'd employ, like how do we have our opinion acknowledged and seen and still come together in unity, even when there are those glaring differences at a practical level. But maybe that is another conversation, unless anybody has some very quick quick thoughts on that. So we acknowledge that, that it needs to happen, that we need to be able to bring our whole selves to honour and respect each other's lived experience and identities. But how do you actually do it at a practical level on a daily basis? And that's a big question. Do either of you want to attempt something, or shall I just put that there as a provocation? And
I think it's a shared responsibility. We, as a leader, you have to make sure that the space is there, but you really need the rest of your colleagues to embrace that as well. And creating that environment can be tricky, but it'll only work if everybody is on board. And so it's about sort of calling it and finding there's no quick solution, but I think we all know, everyone who's on this at the moment would be able to think of an example when it feels really great.
Yes. And sometimes in the space that I've worked in, there's so much diversity that we have to do specific in ways that we address that and don't pretend that everyone's just going to get along easily. So, but work on it. Mindy, we have 2 minutes left. Do you have anything to add to that? And I need to do a wrap up. And if you don't mind, Emerald, please put the survey into the chat, if that's okay.
I think it's supporting our people to embrace the duality and the discomfort. And I think there's something maybe more fundamental to that, to like, how do we support our people, like just on a personal level, to really develop. And I think this is the interesting time to be alive right now, and that this is the opportunity, I think, to take it to a human development and personal evolution sort of perspective, is that, and this is the work. I don't have any short answers to that, but I think we just have to give it a red hot go.
Thank you so much. Thank you both of you for being so wonderful to have a conversation with today, and for your amazing kind of generosity and insights and sharing your vast experience. So we've just included a link to the survey because it's really important for us to get your feedback on the session. And we have one final session left next month that we hope you can join in. And as I mentioned, you can catch up on the sessions on Creative Australia's website. So thank you again to our wonderful speakers, Mindy Liao and Elaine Chia, for sharing their insights and knowledge. Thank you so much to Creative Australia for leading this project, and particularly Adelaide Reef, Emerald Dunfrost and Adam McGowan. And a massive thank you and acknowledgement to our series producer, Dr. Gurkam Ajaralu. Thanks also to our Auslan interpreters, Rebecca Ladd and Jodie Rogers, and our and our captioners as well from AI Media. And importantly, thank you to all of you for participating in this conversation. And we hope you can join us for the next one in March. And looking forward to receiving your feedback.